In this demonstration, I'll show you how to load film into the camera and then how to rewind film once you've finished shooting a whole roll. So again, I've got my Nikon FM2 here, and I have a roll of 35mm film. This particular film is bulk loaded, which means about 100 feet of film on one roll, and then I rolled it onto small ones in complete darkness, or actually using a film changing bag. And this cassette, which is what this is reusable. It's just a cheaper way to buy film, and I'm using this for this demonstration because it's just a 12 exposure roll of film. It's a short piece of film, so I'm not being too wasteful. So to load this camera, typically what I do is I would sit down and I would hold this on my lap with the lens sort of between my legs, which would keep everything in place like that. I think it's the best way to sort of free up your hands, but I can't really do that for this movie. So I'm going to load the film in an awkward position. Again, I'm going to open the back of the film, the back door of the camera, and I'm going to pull down the door release locking lever and then pull up on the film rewind knob and pop it up like so. Again, I'm going to be very careful not to touch the shutter as I do this. So I take the film and it goes into the left side of the camera here, and usually it won't fit in just straight in, and you kind of have to put it in at a slight angle, and sometimes it helps to pull this up. Again, if you're sitting down, it's easier to do that, but I'm going to get that in there like so, and I'm going to push down the film rewind knob. Now the film has a part called a leader, and the leader is this part here that we need to expose to load the film. And this is obviously, since it's been exposed to light, it's no good for making pictures, but we need it anyway. So I'm just gonna let that sit there for a second and show you, hopefully my video camera will focus well enough. I'm gonna load the film onto this spool here, and if you can see, I can spin this. You can see there are slots in it. So I'm going to put the film leader in one of these slots, and I'm going to bury as much of the film leader into this as possible. You want to really ensure that you securely load your film, and if you just put a tiny bit of the film leader in here, it might slip off at some point in the process. The frustrating thing that happens then is that you might think you're shooting film. You might be out photographing and find that you really haven't made any exposures at all because this didn't attach. So I'm going to put that in there. To do that, since this is the film leader, I find that my students often are trying to hold it very delicately because they have an inherent respect for film. But this part is exposed anyway, and it's better to get a good grip on it between your thumb and your forefinger. And I usually have my other thumb on the take-up spool or on the next spool, and I kind of wiggle and push it in, so like that. Now I'm going to take that out in a way that shows to you how much I buried. So I'm just going to pull that, and that much was buried. So that's a good amount to bury. So I'm going to do that once again and get that in there. All right, now we have a little problem here. The film is not flat, so we need to advance the film across here, and the way to do that is with the film advance lever, and I open it up and I see that it won't go. That means I need to trip the shutter. And now it will spin, and as you can see, the film is being taken up. And right here, almost impossible to see on the film, there are some little sprocket teeth that are coming through the holes in the film. And that's making sure everything is nice and parallel, and that's what I want to see. And usually I'll trip one more and advance a little more just to make sure that this is completely loaded, so I don't have any problems whatsoever. Once I have a visual confirmation and I'm sure that it's loaded properly, I'm going to close the back of the camera. But remember, this is where the shutter is, this is where our next picture will be made, but this film is already dead. So that film and that film is already exposed, so we're going to need to do something about that after we close the door. Now some people, after closing the door, they'll take the film rewind knob and kind of dial it back a little bit just to get some of that slack out. Not always a necessary thing, but something to know about. So now again, I have that film in there that is already exposed. So I just need to move it out of the way. And if you notice, when I did that, this is spinning. Now I'm going to do one more. Usually what I do after I close the back of the camera is I fire off 2 exposures. They're not really exposures, but I'm just moving the film through. But you'll notice that this is going to spin. Now watch, as I advance the film, that spins. That's a really great thing to know about, because if your film is actually moving through the camera when you use the film advance lever, you should see that move. If you don't do that little step I did where you kind of make sure the slack is out of it, then it might not move right away. So I recommend doing that because you want that visual confirmation. That tells you everything's okay, you're loading film, or you're actually shooting film. All right, so we have 12 exposures on this film, on this roll of film. My counter is now at number 1, so I can start photographing, and just for the purposes of this demonstration, I'm going to fire off some pictures. Again, this is a short roll of film. I'm wasting it, but it's not really a problem. You see, I'm probably getting more than 12. There. At that point, I can no longer advance it. That means I've come to the end of the roll, and it's actually physically, the end of the film is taped onto a take-up spool over here, and if I pull it harder, I will rip the tape, so I'm not going to pull it harder. So I'm finished with the roll. Now let's talk about rewinding the film and getting the film out of the camera. If you remember from the film prior to this one, I told you that before you rewind the film using the film rewind knob and lever, which is here, you need to flip the camera over and push in this button, which is the film rewind release button. Very important. It's one of the most important things to know about, or else you could really damage both your camera and your film. So I'm just going to push that in with my pinky, and it'll stay in, but I'm in the habit of holding my pinky on it. I don't need to. I'm aware of this, but old habits die hard. So I'm going to hold that in, and then I'm going to rewind the film. Now as I'm rewinding the film, I can feel some tension. I'm pulling the film off from one side of the camera to the other. I can feel that. Oops, I let go and it kind of sprung back on itself. So there's tension, tension, tension. And then there's a point where there's kind of a little jump, which is the film coming off there. And now there's no more tension, which means all the film is back in its little cassette. I could do this all day and it wouldn't make any difference because it's all safe and sound. And now I can pull that down. I can remember to use the release lever here and pull the back of the camera. And there I have it. Roll of film, nicely exposed, ready to process. Thanks, I'll see you next time.